Ready to talk about the legal use of force?
That sounds great. Let's do it.
So if you're considering getting a concealed carry permit or you have a firearm at home and you're thinking about home defense, you really have to understand exactly what it means when it comes to your legal right to use force. Now there's some definitions and interpretations that of course differ from state to state, just like there's differences in how you'd apply for a concealed carry permit. We're going to define a couple of things that have some general definitions across the United States, including a definition of what's called reasonable force, and then a definition of what's called deadly force. So let's talk about reasonable force. State laws vary, but most states are going to define reasonable force as the minimum level of force required to end a threat. Thought of another way, you could think of reasonable force as being a level of force that doesn't exceed the threat. So let's use an example. Let's say I'm walking on a dark alley, which I shouldn't do anyway, but a guy maybe half my size comes up and says he's going to punch me in the nose. So the greatest threat I risk is a bloody nose. If I chose to use deadly force against that person, I'd have a pretty tough time confirming or demonstrating that my use of force was reasonable. Of course, if they had a firearm or a knife, on the other hand, there's going to be a different interpretation there. One of the problems, though, of course, our viewers and any permit holder is going to face is we have to make those decisions in split seconds, and of course, a prosecutor is going to have days or weeks to make their interpretation of the same situation. So think of reasonable force as being the minimum level of force you need to do to end a threat. Deadly force is a step further. State laws are going to vary, but a fairly common definition does exist, which is deadly force may only be used when there is an immediate and unavoidable danger of death or grave bodily harm to an innocent person, where no other option exists other than the use of deadly force. Now, as simple as that statement sounds, every state's going to have different interpretations on everything in there. They'll interpret a difference on what grave bodily harm is. They'll interpret a difference on what it means to be innocent. They'll interpret a difference on what it means to have no other option.